Good morning, everyone. Can you hear me? May I hear some noise from our audience there? Can you feed me some comments there so I can check whether you can actually hear me? All right. So there. Thank you. Welcome to Philippine Association for Communication and Media Research Incorporated's webinar on learning in the new normal. What research tells us, what research we need to do. This webinar is being brought to you in partnership with the UP Department of Communication Research and with technical support from Information and Communications Technology Center of Ateneo de Naga University. We at the Philippine Association for Communication and Media Research Incorporated, or PACMRI, we stand firm on our advocacy that communication in media research is central to understanding issues and challenges that beleaguer our contemporary human society. Our webinar this morning will help us identify gaps which communication and media research can crucially fill as we address concerns that have emerged out of this global pandemic. But before we start our session, let me first remind everyone of some housekeeping rules. On joining the online discussion, you may enter your emoji reactions, questions, and comments in our live stream's reader comments field. But we are requesting everyone to keep the space civil and free from any rude or nasty comments. On getting a certificate, as indicated in our e-poster, you need to satisfy three requirements to be issued a certificate. One, you should have pre-registered before July 15. Two, you need to participate in the online discussion, but make sure that you do so civilly. Okay, so civilly articulate your question, comment, or reaction. And three, you need to complete and submit the evaluation form by 11:59 tonight. On curated e-learning resources, you may visit our resource person site. The QR code and link will be posted later in the webinar. Thank you. We all have experienced how COVID introduced disruptions in our routines and how it also opened opportunities for us to explore possibilities that we would otherwise ignore or would be too complacent to even try. But as members of the academic community, we are suddenly faced with the reality of grounding ourselves on the philosophy and practice of 21st century learning. Dr. Almond Pilar Aguila, our resource person in today's webinar, will share with us how e-learning works and how it can work for us. Dr. Aguila has an interdisciplinary PhD in secondary education, curriculum studies, and communications and technology from the University of Alberta in Canada. Dr. Aguila was the e-learning specialist for ADB eLearn, the external e-learning platform of the Asian Development Bank, where she's currently a senior project coordinator. She has done e-learning through Moodle, Blackboard, Illuminate, and Google Slides. All right, webinar participants. Yes, you, I'm talking to everyone, to all of you. Are you now ready to begin our session with Dr. Aguila? If you are ready, let me test again whether you're alive, alert, awake, and enthusiastic. May I ask you to share out some good vibes, GVs, to everyone here. So how do we send out GVs? All right, I think it's flashed on your screen. some sample good vibe emojis. So may I request you to pin some good vibe emojis in the comments thread. I'll give you some 15 seconds to spread out some good vibes. GVs, come on guys, let's make our Thursday morning come alive with those GVs. Just keep those GV emojis coming. Come on, I can see them, I can see them. All right, thank you. So let's just keep those GV emojis coming as we welcome our resource speaker, Dr. Almond Pilar Aguila. Dr. Aguila, the virtual floor is yours.
Thank you, Dr. San Pascual. Good day, everybody. I've been reading your comments. Been reading your comments earlier. And like any webinar that I've been doing, I'm still very nervous because I don't see people. Can we see my next slide? I'd like to do a very short survey just to feel the room, because it's very difficult to be talking to myself on my screen. So please, on your comment section, can you again tell me where you are? I've been reading your comments. I know that there's somebody from Albay, from Cavite, from Fairview, from Pangasinan. Can you please do it again so the others would know where you're coming from? I'm coming from Quezon City. Where are you coming from? This is the difficulty of e-learning. The screen, as much as it is able to connect you to other people, you feel also very disconnected. So I want to hear from you. Please do it again. Can you type on your Facebook comment box where you're coming from? Are there people from Mindanao? Are there people from Visayas? We'll need to see some of the places that, where, La Union, welcome, Cavite, welcome, Cubao, welcome, Laguna, welcome, Indang, Cavite, Rosario, Taytay, Rizal, Malabon, Cavite, Quezon City, Cavite again, Benguet, Tarlac, Santa Mesa, Pangasinan, Commonwealth, I'm very near there, Pasay City, Diliman, Angeles, Pangasinan, Davao, Paway. That's so good to hear, Taguig. La Union, thank you very much for joining us. Lucban, Quezon, Laguna, Parañaque, Legazpi, Pangasinan, La Union. Okay, can we continue to the Jakarta? Very nice. Welcome from Indonesia. Next slide, please. There's another question I want you to answer. I want you to identify what role you play in the education sector. So in my case, I'm saying that I'm a teacher and a researcher. You don't have to be a teacher. You can be a student, a parent, a school administrator, somebody from the government like DepEd or CHED. You can also say that you're Almond's friend or Almond's relative, forced to watch this for support. I'd like to see what participation you have in the education sector. In my previous webinars, there were a lot of students as well interested in finding out what's in store for them in the coming school year. Yes, very good. You're teacher, researcher. Wow, very nice. Teacher, researcher, instructor, professor, student, undergraduate student. Very nice. Okay, for my last question in this very informal survey, I'd like you to use your emojis. Yes, teacher. So for this question, are you ready for e-learning at the time of COVID? Please type in your answer in your comment box. You can actually do more than just one emoji if you're not quite sure. So you can use the like button to say that you're ready and confident, the laughing button to say that you're getting ready, but since you really don't have a choice. The sad emoji if you're sad because you're not feeling very confident and you feel lost and confused. And angry if you don't feel that you're ready, you don't like e-learning and that it frustrates you. So please keep the emojis coming in your comment box. I'll let you keep thinking about it as I proceed with my presentation. At the end of my presentation, maybe the team can show us some of the responses. And I hope by the end of this presentation, somehow I've given you a bit clarity. So next slide, please. This is not the first webinar that I've done when it comes to e-learning, but it's the first time that, and I'm very thankful to the organizers for thinking of this, of allowing me to speak about my knowledge on e-learning from the perspective of research. As we all know, human activity is informed by research, and this is no different for e-learning when it comes to professional training, organizational training, and educational training. So for this today, I'll be speaking about lots of research done on e-learning and related topics. You don't have to worry. I'm sharing at the end of my presentation a Google Site page where I put in all my curated e-learning materials that you can go through. They're all for free. They're available online, so you can access them if you want more information. So next slide, please. I wanted to show you how I've organized my presentation. So what I'm going to do today is to give you 3 big ideas of digital pedagogy. Particularly for big idea number 1, I want to give you the big idea when it comes to approach. The second big idea will be related to design, and the third would be related to strategy. You might be wondering what these big ideas are. If you're familiar with this particular, next slide please, understanding by design is actually a research-based curriculum planning framework used by teachers all over the world to make sure that when they're designing their curriculum, it's designed for understanding. Big ideas, I've created a box to highlight big ideas, belongs to stage number 1. It's that stage where you identify desired results to establish curricular priorities. Based on that, you're able to create appropriate assessments on how you're going to measure learning. And the third stage would be to identify appropriate learning activities such that your students are able to gain the understanding that is necessary. So let's go back to big ideas. What are big ideas? Big ideas actually reflect the most important knowledge about a topic or a field, a topic or a discipline. So big ideas reflect mastery. And big ideas, if you're a teacher, you're already using big ideas. It's just like understanding by design, where big ideas are normally not said, but they're at the heart of curriculum. It drives curriculum. This is where knowledge resides. So information is not knowledge. Information needs processing to reach knowledge. And you're able to do it in your classroom practice over time. That's why it's not normally explicitly said. Some teachers do it, some don't. And even understanding by design only uses big ideas as the foundation of curriculum, but doesn't really say that you need to express it directly. However, for e-learning, given that you need to provide the 2 C's and 1 D, so you need to be clear. Where's my camera? You need to be clear, you need to be concise, and you need to be direct. And the best way to do it is to explicitly mention your big ideas. So please pay attention not only to what I'm going to say or my content, the content of the webinar, the presentation, but also the form in which I've chosen to do it, how I say it. Next slide, please. So let's go through the 3 big ideas. Let's start with approach. Digital pedagogy is not primarily about technology. If you've attended my other webinars on 21st century learning, I emphasize this over and over again. But I'm going to lift out particular research that says why technology is not the primary consideration. Next slide, please. So what does research on teaching, learning, and technology say about e-learning and technology? So I'm going to, these set of research done many of them, most of them were done pre-COVID, because right now things are still in flux, and many schools have not begun their school year just like us. I'm going to speak about three particular themes, and they're not specific only to e-learning. They're actually about educational technology in general. So the three images you see on the screen are actually representative of these three themes of research. The first two, you will probably tell me that, Dr. Aguila, you don't need to mention them because we're already experiencing them. We don't need research to confirm what we already experience right now. I'm lifting up these two themes particularly because much of the focus right now, much of the focus and effort has been given on the two to the detriment of the last one. So let's start with the first one. Next slide. So then the first theme would be techno-stress and competence. We all know that teachers and students, even parents, school officials, the government is quite focused on the need for technical skills. There's a minimum technical requirement for e-learning. You're required to at least learn how to use a learning management system such as Moodle or Canvas, or a content management system like websites such as Google platforms like Google Sites and Google Classroom, and video conferencing apps. Research has been done over and over again on educational technology, even before e-learning. And it has proven that teachers experience a lot of techno-stress when it comes to new educational technology. And statistical tests have also proven how the age of a teacher, the more senior teacher, the more seasoned and experienced teacher, becomes more resistant to technology, to new forms of educational technology, particularly because of that fear of needing to be competent in the use of those technologies. And the same is true for students. I know that a lot of students in my past webinars have complained about how difficult it is for them right now to be preparing for a school year where they're not going to be in their classrooms. They're going to do it probably online and in other formats through a distance, and having to learn LMS and other platforms aside from what they're going to learn in the classroom or in class. So let's move on to the next. Next slide, please. Yes, the next theme would be access to technology. And it's not unfamiliar to us. We're a developing country. Even in Metro Manila, studies have shown that there are digital inequalities. You don't even need research for me to tell you this. We know this. This is part of what we need to, the complexity of e-learning involves access to technology. So I even emphasize in my other webinars that if e-learning is not possible for you because you live in a place where you don't have internet, or internet is not stable, then don't use technology. Don't use e-learning. There are other forms of technology. But in the same way that maybe technology can hinder learning, it can also allow for learning. Just like this webinar, it's free to teachers, so you have access to it. However, in the past, since I've also been involved in Google Suite tutorials, and these are done synchronously, meaning live, I've seen how teachers begin with the tutorial and then start complaining that, oh no, my internet is so slow, now I can't keep up. My screen has frozen, I can't participate. So let's go on to the next, and this is the most important one. So the point is really, e-learning requires a different kind of technical enskillment. And like I said, much of the attention has been given to the two. Acquiring technical skills for particular digital technologies. And yet, it's more than that. Or the access to technology, like the government. Of course, I understand that they need to come up with gadgets and internet connection for everyone so e-learning can happen. However, there is a line of research. Next slide, please. that helps teachers actually figure out what kind of skills they need. And one of the popular ones is called TPAC. What is TPAC? TPAC talks about the need to integrate technological, pedagogical, and content knowledge and their intersections, how important these are. I won't go deeply into this. I have resources in my page that you can look at if you're interested in this. But I want to show you to operationalize this to e-learning. So next slide, please. So if we were to identify the technologies involved in e-learning, the pink circle on top, so we have digital learning tools, like I said, learning management systems, content management systems, video conferencing apps, and other apps that the teacher might use alongside e-learning for e-learning. However, what is also neglected is the idea that the internet provides a different kind of space for learning. There's too much to talk about when it comes to the difference between virtual time and physical time. Time runs differently on the internet. There are a lot of studies done on this, and let me just give you one concrete example. So for a face-to-face class, when a teacher requires students to read materials prior to the regular session in class, for example, you're a university instructor, you meet your students 3 hours once a week. When you give your students assignments, your students will not go up to you and say, I spent 1 hour reading the materials, therefore we can only meet 2 hours now in the class. The difference with e-learning is your entire learning package, all the effort that is poured into the learning package is already considered part of the learning. So please be cognizant of that when you're trying to figure out what your schedule will be. So let's move on to pedagogical knowledge, which involves 21st century learning. Okay, we can stay on that slide. Please stay on this slide. So pedagogical knowledge involves 21st century learning. A lot of studies have been done on what we're getting wrong about 21st century learning. And many of the studies, and I'm not particularizing this only to DepEd or to the Philippines, this has been done around the world. And the common conclusion is that policymakers, even schools, teacher training does not give direct, clear instruction on how teachers are going to apply 21st century learning to educational technology. So they don't know how to apply it. They don't know how to assess it. And that's very problematic. And these studies are not even particular to e-learning. I've looked at studies wherein in developed countries, young teachers, those who have newly graduated, who have very high-tech tools such as the interactive whiteboard in their classroom, and they're afraid to use them because they don't know how to apply 21st century learning. So it's a common failure in terms of policy as well as teacher training. So if we look at what the teacher needs to, and this is my suggestion, if you're a school administrator or you're handling teacher training, please look particularly at this slide because you need to know all of these. Consider these whenever you are training teachers. So it's not only training them to use the LMS or the CMS or the video conferencing app. You also have to consider how do technologies of e-learning and the subject matter influence each other. Is it math? Is it communication? What is appropriate? Technological, pedagogical knowledge would involve how do these technologies of e-learning, how can they be used for teaching and learning? And then finally, what e-learning techniques are appropriate to the type of content knowledge you want. So next slide, please. So if I were to summarize, big idea number one in terms of approach, please don't forget, digital pedagogy is not primarily about technology, but how technology can enhance teaching and learning. More particularly, next slide, please. I'm lifting this up from a research that I encountered online. A successful digital conversion is not determined by the technology, but by how technology enables teaching and learning. So please, if you're deciding on what particular technology to use, whether it's for e-learning or just simple distance learning because you can't do e-learning, please don't do it on the basis of the technology. Don't choose a technology because it's popular, it's expensive, therefore it's very high tech, or it's cute. There are many things that you can do with it. Remember, the point always is learning. Is it going to help or is it going to just distract? Okay, let's move on to the second big idea. I'm hoping you're following along. I'm doing this very quickly because I want to give you more time to ask questions. So the next is the design. E-learning requires innovation. And why? Next slide, please. So a lot of research has been done on the e-learning. There are new studies being released now on how e-learning has been used during the time of COVID. I'm being asked if I can share the framework. Yes, I can share it. I'll share it. May I just post it on my Google site? I'll give you the link later. Okay, can I concentrate now on my presentation? Okay, so research on e-learning, there's a lot of research that has been done on e-learning for a very long time. And unfortunately, there are no hard and fast rules. That's why if you've listened to my webinars, I can't give you concrete answers. I can only give you several guidelines like keep it short, chunk the content, make it bite-sized, need to know over nice to know, just in time rather just in case learning. And that's because, next slide please. Research still hasn't made conclusions on many things about e-learning. So for example, e-course length. I can't even tell you. I can just tell you that keep it short. But how short is short? I'm often asked. The problem is the research on student attention, and this has been done over decades, not just now, not particular to e-learning. Like the conclusion, I'm sure you've heard about this before, that in a lecture, a student can only concentrate on a lecture for about 10 to 15 minutes. And then they lose interest already. They disengage, they no longer pay attention. This is the reason why the lecture has dwindled in its popularity in the last few decades. And for e-learning, the same is true. They can't even determine, is it 5 minutes, 5 seconds for videos, or even engagement on an online course. I've read that 20 minutes, some say 10, 15. So really, the reason why is because there are many variables, there are many factors involved, including teacher engagement. So the importance of the teaching style of the one delivering the lecture. So the same lecture can be engaging if it's delivered by someone else. Okay, another thing that can be also debated on is whether it's good to do synchronous or asynchronous learning. Synchronous learning is real time. You're watching this video as I'm saying my words in chronological time. Or it can be asynchronous. You can be watching this webinar. After it's done, you can watch it on the Facebook page of PACMRI. So what have studies said? There are strengths and weaknesses of each one. But what I found very interesting is that when they tested student performance, when it came to knowledge skills, students did better when they were given asynchronous learning. Why? Because they could return to the material anytime. If they want more understanding or they've forgotten something, they can always return. However, when it came to skills development, they preferred synchronous learning. They wanted to see real-time demonstrations. They wanted guidance from their instructors in real time. Another is modes of learning. Of course, there have been debates over, is it better to do face-to-face learning, blended learning, fully online learning? And I would recommend that if you want to do research on modes of learning in the time of COVID, please consider homeschooling also as another option, because it's become a very significant option for many families, even Filipino families. So, of course, just like communication, researchers have concluded the best really is still face-to-face. However, we don't have a choice. In the time of COVID, we have to consider the use of technologies to bridge the distance between our students. And then you have e-learning strategies. This is a very lively field of research because of the e-learning industry. It's a booming industry, and I don't know. I don't hesitate to say that in the Philippines, the e-learning industry, the commercial e-learning industry, seems to be more developed than educational e-learning right now. But I'm hopeful that we can catch up. So anyway, one very popular strategy that is being used is gamification. And let me warn you, gamification is nice to engage your learners, to want to stay and listen to what you are trying to say. But be warned that gamification has not been concluded to really lead to learning. They've actually compared strategies between gamification and the traditional strategies of learning, and they found that students performed the same way. So I would use gamification for e-learning strategically. Don't use it as your primary, because in a way it also trivializes, and it only taps into lower order thinking skills. We want to achieve higher order thinking skills when it comes to 21st century learning. So use it with caution and strategically. And finally, application of 21st century learning skills. I'd like to emphasize that development of 21st century learning, the frameworks and the skills are still ongoing. They're being developed and revised because they need to be made applicable to certain disciplines. I'll talk more about this later. Next slide, please. So even if I'm saying that research hasn't really given us firm conclusions on how to do things, I can still give you some guidance. So for example, you can consider the nuances of teaching and learning. A lot of research has been done on teaching and learning styles. I'm sure you've heard of, the visual learner, kinetic learner. In fact, if you're using the internet, they say you need to use more visuals, infographics, videos, and so on. And then you can also consider technical competence of teachers and learners. I know that there's not much time. We're about to start the school year. It's just a few weeks away. And are you ready to use e-learning? Like I said, e-learning is very complex. It's very difficult. And then discipline-specific ways to apply the 4 C's. Studies have shown that the 4 C's, communication, critical thinking, creativity, and what's the 4th one? Now I've lost my... Okay, there's a 4th one. Anyway, I'm sure you know what it is, but it's skipping my mind right now. But anyway, these 4 C's are not content neutral. What does that mean? It can be applied in different ways depending on what the subject is. So if it's collaboration. Thank you, Dean Joshua of Ateneo ICTC. So collaboration, very important to communication. I'm so sorry. So the 4 C's are not applied in the same way in various disciplines. For example, economics. Creativity in economics is different from creativity in math, in communication, in physics. So you have to be also aware of that. And of course, availability and accessibility of technology. Next slide, please. So what I would really recommend is to use innovation. It's a time of great flux, but it's also an opportunity for us to find our own way into e-learning, which is culture specific as well. That's part of 21st century learning, because many of the strategies are actually developed abroad in the West, not in the East, not in the Philippines. So a lot of studies have provided us with case studies of how e-learning can be done well. And it can be done well if you actually mix it up. Use it just like in research, doing triangulation. So balancing the strengths and weaknesses of certain strategies to make it work, such as formal and informal instruction, synchronous and asynchronous, blended learning. I'd like to speak particularly about blended learning. Blended learning for more than a decade has already been acknowledged by the education sector as having a lot of great effectiveness in learning. So when I was a student when I was a graduate student in Canada, all of our university courses had a corresponding LMS site, a Moodle site, where teachers were asked to use the Moodle sites as well as our face-to-face instruction. So it was not some were very savvy. They used Moodle for us to submit our assignments, to be given feedback. We would have sessions where we would collaborate with our classmates there, post our comments about our readings there. However, some instructors, particularly the older ones, the more seasoned ones, only used Moodle once in the term just to upload their course outline. So blended learning is very important also. The next would be individual and collaborative learning. You can mix it up. Collaborative learning is very important, like the 4 C's. One is collaboration, right? So co-learning and collaboration are very powerful when it comes to 21st century learning. However, it might be difficult for you if all you do is to assign your students to do group work. How will you do your assessments? Because at the end of the semester, you're asked to provide a grade for each student. So you have to mix it up with individual assessments. So how I do this is I would really highly recommend you use reflection papers. You might think it's very basic. You do it when you're in high school or when you're in grade school, but actually they're quite powerful. When I was in my PhD program, you were given so many reflection papers, and you can apply the 4 C's when you do reflection papers. The good thing about reflection papers when you're doing e-learning is that you can monitor what's happening to your student. You can see if the student is following what's happening in the learning. And then finally, formative and summative assessments. I would warn you that for summative and formative assessments, make them meaningful, integrate them. They need to feed into each other. They need to make sense. Next slide, please. So if we were to summarize, and I'm trying to do this very quickly, I can hardly breathe, but I have so much to share with you, and I really want to share everything with you. And I'm barely scratching the surface as it is. So when it comes to design, e-learning requires innovation since there are no hard and fast rules. But the good thing about it is that you can actually innovate. There's this opportunity. So let's not be negative about the challenges that we're facing right now, but it's a time to experiment and do what we can as teachers. Next slide, please. So this next big idea refers to strategy. And I think among all the 3 big ideas, you will appreciate this particular big idea because it is so practical. It is something that you can actually use in your practice. So big idea number 1 refers to strategy. So learners need to be motivated and engaged. And what does research say about this? Next slide, please. So a lot of research has been done on strategies to motivate and engage learners. Like I said, particularly because aside from the education sector, industry is in need of e-learning, and they need to use e-learning for training and for their employees, those who are taking e-learning training instead of face-to-face training. They need to be motivated and engaged. And a lot of research has been done about this. And I want to provide you with one particular theory. It's a very popular theory that has been used for learning, not just for e-learning. However, I've noticed that it's applied across the board, not just for educational training, educational use of e-learning, but for industry training. You can go through websites online and look for popular hints and tips about e-learning, and you will find the same things that I'll be talking about. So this theory is called self-determination theory. It's a psychological theory. And what does it say about motivation and engagement of learners? You need to provide your learners with autonomy, competence, and relatedness. Next slide, please. So let's go through each one. So the first one is to allow your learners to be independent. How do you do this? Number one is to provide them choices and variety. So this will also be linked to the types of learners you have. Are they more visual or not? Remember that in 21st century learning, the role of the teacher has changed. We're now curators of knowledge. It's not that we tell them what is knowledge, but we point them to the right direction. But by providing them different ways to access that knowledge, we're allowing them to be independent. Also give them responsibility for their own learning. It's a psychological theory. So you understand that, when you invest something, when you invest a lot in something, it is of greater value for you. Therefore, that's your motivation. They remain engaged because they're already invested. And then you also need to provide meaningful and personalized learning. 21st century learning bridges the gap between learning as being institutionalized and learning as being part of life. And that's also what e-learning espouses. And finally, minimize pressure and control. So if you have to do away with the idea that I need to meet my students 3 hours a week, then you're on the right track, because you cannot translate face-to-face classes directly. Yung parang something is lost in the translation if you think you can do it exactly the same way. Next slide, please. Next is to develop competence of learners. The theory talks about effectance relevant feedback. And what is that? That's providing clear, empathetic, and action-oriented feedback. How do you do this? I saw my supervisor, Catherine Adams. I was her teaching assistant for a course that she was training me to teach the following semester, the following term. So the following term, I became the principal instructor of that course. And I saw her use, it was the first time I saw anybody use a descriptive rubrics. My background is I don't have an undergraduate degree in education. But because I was in the faculty of education, I was exposed to these strategies. So she used descriptive rubrics where she had the criteria of what she was looking for whenever she would evaluate submissions of assignments or presentations. And she would describe exactly what is outstanding when you talk about creativity, or when you talk about insightfulness. What does that mean? So when she would have them present in class, she would print out the descriptive rubrics and she would highlight the descriptions of the things that the student was able to hit. And aside from that, she had a comment section in the bottom. It was an empty box where she would write her comments. So what does clear, empathetic, and action-oriented feedback mean? I noticed that she had a formula. She always started with something positive to say. And she always used the name of the student to show it's important, because it's also part of what research has said about education and learning. How learning involves that strong relationship between the teacher and the student, the mentoring that's involved. So her formula was this way. She'd start with the positive, and then she'll mention whatever is negative, and then give action-oriented feedback. So for example, Almond, good effort in providing the information concisely, whatever. However, you fail to do the following. So next time, you might benefit from trying to to improve on the following. So you might need to read up on these and these and these, or improve your skills in the following. So that's action-oriented feedback. Why is empathetic there? Studies have shown that negative feedback don't do anything for the learning. Instead of motivating your students, you get to discourage them. That's not to say that you cannot give negative feedback. What it's saying is that you need to balance, and you need to give them action-oriented feedback. So they know that whatever they've done, they still have time to learn and improve. And then you can also use peer evaluation. Peer evaluation is very useful in two ways. One is you help the student become masterful in doing evaluations of the work of their peers. Another way is for them to gain the competence of improving on their work before the final submission. I saw one strategy done by a professor, and this was one of the case studies I was talking about, but this isn't for e-learning. Yeah, I think it's for e-learning, I'm sorry. So what the instructor did was, instead of her reviewing all the drafts of her students, because I know as teachers, and I've experienced this as well, towards the end of the semester, a lot of my students, because I teach research classes, approach me requesting me to read their drafts, such that the feedback I give them will allow them to improve in their work. But it's not all the time that you have the luxury of going through several drafts that your students want you to look at. There's so much to do. So what the teacher did was, instead of her evaluating, she included that as part of her assessment, that they were assigned to also do peer evaluation. Through the evaluation, students were able to improve on their drafts. Finally, challenging learning activities. And this is, I guess, where gamification also comes in. So you are motivated when you know you're doing well at something, especially if it's difficult. That's why we get engaged with video games. We get so hooked on all of these things. Next slide, please. And this is the last strategy. So the last strategy is to ensure relatedness in your online class. A lot of theories have been developed on social presence and sense of community when it comes to e-learning. In fact, the lack of these two, these are very important when it comes to e-learning, have been concluded to be the reasons why MOOCs or massive open online courses don't work. Also, the same is true for distance learning. So I mentioned earlier that I was going to say a little bit more about blended learning. I know of several programs, I'm sure some of you already are familiar as well, where they combine e-learning and face-to-face learning. I think Open University, if I'm not mistaken, does the same thing. So throughout the school year, students and professors do e-learning mostly throughout the school year, except for 2 weeks in the school year. And they call it, at least in my university before, they call it the spring term. So they would come together for 2 weeks for intensive classes, face-to-face classes. That's the time they meet their classmates. That's also the time they meet their professors. So it's very important to feel humans across the screen, just like my discomfort in not knowing if you're out there. Are you listening? Because I'm just talking to myself. I don't know if I've been disconnected already. Am I still online? And then finally, pedagogy as personal unwarned. This is still part of self-determination theory. And it's also related to a lot of research that has been done on teaching and learning, not only for e-learning. It's very important for the students to know that the warmth, concern, and respect of teachers. One of the studies I read on e-learning said that those are more important than even the strategies that are used. So even if you use Zoom, Even if your students can see you, but they can't feel you because they don't feel that personal touch. As I said earlier in the descriptive rubrics, um, Kathy would actually uh, name the student like Almond, good job, because of that. So anyway, next slide, please. So finally, to conclude this long, big idea number 3, when it comes to strategy, e-learners need to be motivated and engaged through self-determination, which involve autonomy, competence, and relatedness. And if we were to summarize, let's review. There are 3 big ideas that I've given you. Next slide, please. And this is my last slide. So the 3 big ideas of digital pedagogy are, when it comes to approach, digital pedagogy is not primarily about technology. When it comes to design, e-learning requires innovation. And the last big idea, strategy, e-learners need to be motivated and engaged. Like I said, I'm only naming 3 big ideas. There are a lot more. I'm just focusing on these 3 because I believe this will really be helpful to you as you prepare for the coming school year. So, next slide, please. Now I can breathe because now it is your time to ask questions and give me comments. So like I promised you, I'm sharing with you my e-learning resources. Hi, Dr. San Pascual. Welcome back.
Hello, can you all hear me? Thank you, Almond. All right.
So,
Before I synthesize, yes, Dr. Almond. All right.
there's a little lag, I think. Anyway, okay.
All right. Before I synthesize Dr. Aguila's presentation, some administrative reminders before we begin the open forum as well. Let me again remind everyone to enter your questions and comments in our live stream's reader comments field. Please keep them civil, okay? And as indicated in our e-poster, you need to satisfy 3 requirements to be issued a certificate. So for those of you who just tuned in or who tuned in late, 3 requirements to be issued a certificate. Number 1, you should have pre-registered before July 15. Number 2, you need to participate in the online discussion, but make sure that you do so civilly. And 3, you need to complete and submit the evaluation form by 11:59 tonight. We will be flashing the link to the form before we end today's webinar. Instead of Dr. Aguila's presentation slides, you may visit her curated e-learning resources site. The QR code and link were earlier shared. We will also be flashing them again later on. And as promised, she will add the link to the TPAC framework in her curated site.
It's actually there. I have 2 particular journal articles that are primary resources of TPAC. It's by those particular scholars who came up with TPAC.
Thank you, Dr. And these are for free, right?
Yes.
Thank you. And if you have questions or concerns or need further clarifications, Dr. Aguila also flashed her email address on the slide earlier. You can again view her email address when we flash the slide again later in the webinar. So let's continue. Okay, so as members of the academic community, we can ruminate on Dr. Aguila's presentation from 2 distinct but highly connected vantage points, as communication and or media teachers and as communication and or media researchers. First, as communication and or media teachers. We are currently rightfully preoccupied in preparing the courses that we will be teaching for remote learning. As we gear up for the coming semester, Dr. Aguila reminded us that digital pedagogy is not primarily about technology, but how technology can enhance teaching and learning. 2, that e-learning requires innovation, since there are no hard and fast rules. And three, that e-learners need to be motivated and engaged through self-determination. Dr. Aguila presented Kohler and Mishra's feedback framework, which actually identifies areas that are critical for us as we prepare for distance ed. For instance, with respect to content knowledge, now that we are shifting to remote mode of class delivery, we as teachers, we are curating content for the courses that we will be offering remotely. With regard to pedagogical knowledge, as teachers during this time, we are designing the best strategy to engage our learners synchronously and asynchronously through our curated course packs. As for technological knowledge, as teachers, we are now facing the challenge of maximizing the use of various forms of technology, both digital and analog, to reach our learners and to enrich their learning experience wherever they are and however basic or advanced their technological access is. So that's for us as teachers. Now, from the vantage point of us as communication and media researchers, Dr. Agla's presentation also pointed gaps which comm and media research can actually fill. She showed us how the TPAC framework again can help us locate where our theoretical, methodological, and practical inquiries can be directed. For instance, I have a slide there. If you are interested in, say, studying effective distance learning strategies, then your inquiry would straddle the technological pedagogical knowledge overlap. And your study would be best informed by theories and literature from these two domains. Meanwhile, an inquiry on, say, 21st century learning in the Philippines during COVID-19 may be designed to cover the overlap of all three domains, and as such will be best informed again by theories and literature from these three domains. So the impact framework will serve as a guide for us where to locate our study and where to draw theories and literature from. Okay, that said, let me read some questions or comments. Okay. We have a lot, Dr. Almond. So, okay, the first one. Okay, this is a question, Dr. Almond.
Yes.
How can we target higher order cognitive learning, such as creation and evaluation from Bloom's model? That's the first question.
Mahirap yan. Anyway, it really depends on the type of subject that you have. It depends on, you have to strategize what are your formative and summative assessments. Ako kasi what I do is I always conceptualize exactly what my learners will do. And what I do is I always think of how they will apply concepts and theories. So, for example, paano ba? It's very hard because it's very content specific. So try to find exemplars as well online. So there are ways to do it that does not have to be just doing it on Zoom or doing it on Skype. They can still do things, be creative in how they do things. So I ask them to apply concepts. Very hard to do, I know. That's why even for reflection papers, the reflection papers can be used to apply critical thinking, collaboration, all of that, communication. There. Okay. It's very hard for me to be specific when I don't know all the details.
Right. Okay. I have another one here, and I think this is your fan, a former graduate student in UP.
Wow.
So, Mama, ibibigay ko sa iyo yung meaning niya. Ang question niya, because you mentioned gamification. So aside from gamification, how do you keep your students interested in the lectures during your online classrooms? And what are the ethics to be considered in conducting online education? We have several questions about ethics.
Ayan, kilala ko yan. Hi, Jerome. Nice to see you. Again, sorry, towards the end. Can you read towards the end?
So actually, number one, the first question was about keeping the students engaged and interested, and the second is about ethics.
Okay, about ethics. So number one, you need to really establish the relationships in the class. Like I said, there has to be, and the students need to understand the meaning and the context of the learning. So you need to personalize. So what I ask them to do, for example, I'm teaching theory, I ask them to apply theory, or I ask them to introduce the materials that I've given them, but be critical. So it's not just summarizing a reading, but asking them to identify what did you relate to, what did you find confusing, what did you find very striking about the material, and how do you connect it to your real experiences. So that's one thing. Aside from gamification, the good thing to do is to let them apply. Because that's when, like I keep saying, I think it's Merleau-Ponty yata to. Phenomenology of perception nga ba? Please don't crucify me, I don't remember. But anyway, what he says is maximal grip. I talked about this before. So when you want to master something, you hold it in your hand. So if you want to learn tennis, you don't learn tennis by reading. You hold it in your hand and you try it out. So in that way, by making it personal, they remember it. So my graduate students, when I ask them to do that exercise to introduce materials, at least I'm very sure that they've mastered those materials. And in the end, they start liking certain materials.
So there's a lot more processing involved. It's really a high involved approach
Kasi
to learn.
critical thinking, it's not enough that you get the information. The information is only lower order thinking skills. Yun yung memory, kaya nga, I'm not gonna be, I wouldn't put too much weight on gamification. It will just make it lively, but the learning itself, research has not concluded that gamification is effective in that way. Yung as for the ethics is really difficult, diba? It's really part and parcel of teaching. So we will have to also thread our way. So I guess, diba, there are basic ways to, Merleau-Ponty, yes. Tama ako. Phenomenology of perception. Nosebleed yun eh, nung PhD ko.
So may tanong din dito kasi part of the learning resources that they recommend to their students are not available online, like textbooks, di ba?
Ayun. So, ganito ang ginagawa ko. Because ever since I started teaching, when I came back from Canada, I think very differently about education. So because of 21st century learning, yung variety, the giving variety, I don't use textbooks anymore. I only use materials that I can find online through Google Scholar. These are still very scholarly. I even used videos because I know that's how accessible they are. So in that way also, I'm able to teach my students how to find materials that are credible, that will add to their knowledge. Kasi di ba, lifelong learning. So even after the course is done, I want to equip my students with the facility to still be able to continue the learning after the course. And the way to do it is to show them. So the curated materials gives them an understanding also of how I was able to come up with the list. It's not easy. I'm sure you know that as well. When you're looking...
Parang for us na nagsisimula pa lang the birthing day, you're actually looking for materials, reading, viewing, listening to them. Kasi nga, curate.
And I would recommend for teachers to collaborate as well. Create platforms where you can share, like what I did, yung curated e-learning platform. Create a wiki where professors can plug in materials. Kasi these materials are not yours anyway. That's why I'm able to share, because they're not even mine. They're available online. They've been written by other authors. But I'm already putting my stamp on it to say that these are important.
Sige. We actually have a lot of questions. Marami siguro sa atin dito ang mga teachers. Okay, may tanong about cheating. Paano daw maiiwasan?
Ayun. Yung cheating
ka.
kasi, that comes into play if you think that the only way to assess your learners is through summative assessment, meaning tests, exams, quizzes. But if you change your perception, because in my classes, even in my graduate classes, I no longer give them those. Kasi nga, most of them access lower order thinking skills. So you elevate it. You make it like a project or a workshop, or ask them to submit papers instead, like research papers, ganon. Because you cannot avoid. It's very hard to avoid. I don't know how that will work out for basic education. So
yeah, we in the university we're also looking for alternative ways. Kasi may mga times na may mga pag-objective yung exam or exercises or assessment tool na ginagamit. Now we have to innovate na para yun nga mas makita natin na talaga.
Open notes.
Yeah, open notes kasi lahat, di ba?
Oh, so ask for parang imbis na objective, yung mga essay type where they need to apply concepts. So alam mo that they're the ones doing that. That's the importance of reflection papers, because you know how they write already. So you know if they're cheating because they don't sound the same. So if you're doing that, makikita mo na, and the reflection papers don't need to be long. They can be a short 3 pages, double spaced. You just see what is happening in the head of your students. So you learn.
So writing exercises, no? So you get to know them and how they write. And then later on, kapag graded assessment na talaga, makikita mo, match mo.
I give grades for reflection papers.
Okay, all right. Sige.
So an example of an exercise that I give them for reflection papers, yung very, very favorite ko yan, twin assignments yan. So for the first week, for 24 hours, they're supposed to monitor their use of communication technology. Bahala sila how they want to report it. And then reflect on it. What are the insights about their own use of technology, communications technology. And the following week, for 24 hours, they have to disconnect from all of them. And then reflect again. So dun pumapasok yung critical thinking. And it's important because for them to realize who they are as communicators as well. Before they can even start doing research, they have to understand who they are. Ano yung biases nila? Where are they coming from? So
yeah. So talking about the learners, no, how can we, kasi high involvement na ngayon sa kanila talaga eh. Hindi na yung dating getting by, winning it, hindi na pwede yun eh, di ba? Mas malaki na yung active role nila dito sa proseso na ito. So how can we properly and adequately bring our students on board the philosophy and practice of 21st century learning? Kasi parang puro lahat sa ating teachers in prep eh. So how can we prep our students naman?
Sa simula pa lang, you make it part of the design of your course outline. If you look at, kasi in my curated site, I have examples there. I think I have the course I teach for MA, what's it called? Communication, society, ano na nga yun? The course I teach, the MA course I teach. I forgot what it's called, but it's called Com 201, I think, right? So anyway, communication, culture, and society. Thank you very much for feeding that to me. So anyway, if you look at the Google site, I have my course outline there. If you look at my course outline, I already laid down the rules. I'm using flipped classroom model. You need to read your materials, because in class, what we're going to do is we're going to already apply. I'm not going to do lectures. We're going to have discussions. I want to hear from students. I'm just going to moderate. In fact, the reason why I ask my MA students to introduce the materials is because they're assigned to moderate the discussion. So in that sense, it becomes richer because each student brings his or her experiences, and you draw a connection between theory and practice. And that's exactly what 21st century is, bridging the gap.
Yeah.
So I hope that, so from the very beginning, you already laid down the rules. Parang this is how it's going to happen. It's going to be different. In fact, sorry, Chen, to interrupt, but in my classes, I ask them to change the format of the classroom. I sit with my students. I don't stand up. I don't sit in the teacher's table. So I ask them to form a circle with their chairs, yung parang workshop style, and I sit with them because I want them to understand that the power is distributed within among all of us. We're all also learner. I'm also a learner. I'm also going to learn from them. So the onus is not just on you. They also take responsibility for their own learning. And I tell them this during the orientation. I tell them if you don't engage and you won't learn anything. Each class is also composed of each student. And if one student is not motivated and infects the others, you learn nothing. So passion of the teacher is very important as well. So studies have shown that the passion of the teacher and the concern, the warmth, that the student feels that the teacher is particularly concerned on his or her learning, they're very important. I guess more important than the technologies themselves. It's how you use technology. How and why. You have to clarify that. And also parang giving meaning to what you're learning. Kasi you have to go beyond the textbook always, beyond the content, all the time. So for 21st century learning.
So bagong kultura, no, on how we do classes, how we manage, how we facilitate learning. No?
And it's very difficult, especially for those who have not been exposed. Because lahat naman tayo, I was a product of 20th century learning. So to be forced to apply 21st century learning without having seen it demonstrated to you, it's hard. So teachers, what they can do is to search for information that's out there. Look at videos. I have a few videos in my Google site that you can also look at. Singapore does it very well. Yun.
See, I have another question. What would be the possible solution for students who find their homes a problematic learning environment?
Sorry?
Possible solution for students who find their homes a problematic learning environment.
What I've heard from others, and I've heard this from homeschoolers as well, because my nephews are going to be homeschooled. So we're also undergoing our own transition. I've been told by mothers who do homeschooling that they actually create a particular space for their students to their children to learn. So they designate a particular space in the home for the learning. And in fact, they even ask their children to dress up so that they're in the right frame of mind. Just like us, we need to dress up when we're doing a webinar. We can't be in our pajamas, though we wish we could be. So it's also getting in that frame of mind, but I understand the complexities because a lot of people are also working from home. So how do you delegate even the use of the internet? It's very difficult. So that's why it's important for instructors to also be considerate. That's why you might need to use asynchronous rather than synchronous. Don't rely too much on synchronous because it's difficult. What if the learner is not able to go online on that specific session for that specific session because the mother is on a conference call? So between the two, what is more important would be the conference call rather than yours.
Right. We're also getting a lot of questions kasi na there are students na unstable or erratic yung internet connection. Yeah. Kailangan din may asynchronous, di ba? Yung curated materials mo rin ay hitik, di ba?
You might want to take your mind off your session, yung parang, I meet 1 to 4 p.m. on Mondays. Don't think about that. Think of the entire week, allowing them more time to do it. So if I were to create a unit for myself, I would give them the learning package would start with a short video of me talking about the materials, giving meaning, giving context. How are you supposed to read these materials? What are you going to look at? What is specific to what we are learning? So yun. Di ba ganon? Kasi as a teacher, you also draw attention to certain things in the material.
Doc Amon, ang dami nating magagandang questions. Pero lalo na sa teaching, pero babalik muna tayo sa research kasi mukhang naiwan natin about
I'll just
doing
be here if you need me.
Sige. About researching. If we are to prioritize, what would you say are the research gaps that need to be immediately addressed with respect to studies on e-learning?
Nako, how to apply 21st century learning to e-learning. Yon, I really think that DepEd school officials, please rethink your training programs. Don't focus just on the technology. Because your teachers will learn how to, yes, start a Zoom session, but how do they facilitate such that learning takes place? So, yon, I think that's the priority. Yung TPAC, if you can do the TPAC, very good, especially for discipline specific. So for ComRes, if ComRes can start doing workshops on that. Yeah.
Sige. Siguro we have time for a couple more questions. Sorry, nagra-random na lang. Ang dami kasi. So ito na lang yung una kong nakikita sa aking feed. Okay. But I know Dr. Aguila would be willing to answer questions that we cannot address in this forum. So if they can just email you, tama ba, Dr. Aguila? Just send you an email. So
I don't know if it's a good idea to actually do a YouTube live consultation to teachers kasi alam ko there are so many questions that I can't seem to answer everything. So I don't know if that's somebody send me an email and let's talk. Maybe we can do like a workshop on there.
So meron na series number 2 yung yung talk with Dr. Alan kung sakaling may critical mass na mag-request sa kanya na another session. Okay. Okay, ito. Theoretically, peer evaluation is a good strategy in developing students' competence. But in reality, it seems to be problematic to me, to the one who posted, especially because students do not have the same competence in executing it. To what extent should we use peer evaluation in our classes, whether online or offline?
It really depends. There are so many variables, like even for teaching styles, it really depends on a lot of things, who your learners are, who you are as a teacher. So I will leave it up to you because it's a time of innovation and experimentation. There, somebody posted my curated, the URL for my curated site. Yes, it's there.
Okay. Ito naman ay yung sense ng, may isa na post ng siya that students feel that they are not learning that much through online or distance learning. So medyo may pa din.
You have to get them on board. So parang listen to them as well. Kasi it's a time of collaboration. So you collaborate not only with your co-faculty, work together. You need to work together with your students. Tell them that this is something that's new to me as well, and let's help each other. And if you start a plan, it doesn't work, change the plan. That can be done. Because it's a time of experimentation. Nobody knows really how to do this. I would have great faith in teachers because they know their content. They know their learners. It's just a matter of knowing the pedagogical approach and the use of educational technology. Yun.
Okay. Oo nga. Nung nakita ko yung TPAC, doon nga yung mga iniisip ko lang dati, no? Tapos ngayon nasa Model 4, and it really guides you in preparing. Kahit na teacher ka lang, hindi ka administrator, nakikita mo yung mga areas na kailangan mo i-prepare. And in our earlier conversation with Dr. Aguila, you highlighted content na essentially ready na naman, di ba? Nandiyan na siya eh. But now, yung pedagogy and technology, yun ang kailangan mong i-align with the remote or distance.
Kasi di ba, 21st century learning is student-centered. It's not content-centered. So in fact, each class that you teach, and you know this because in your practice, ganun eh. Even if you teach the same course over and over again, it feels different because of the people involved. Even the dynamic. So I always tell my students in the first day of class, how successful we are in your learning would depend on your attitude and how all of your classmates work together also. Because if you see different dynamics in classes, right? There are some students that just go because they feel they're forced to go. And
Ngayon, magkakaalaman.
Ha?
Magkakaalaman ngayon kung sino ang prepared.
Magkakaalaman kung teacher ka talaga. Because if you're a teacher, you can feel your way into this. Like I said, there are no hard and fast rules. Don't let that discourage you. That should encourage you. That means there's room for innovation. There's room to practice who you are as a teacher. Like I said nga, passion of the teacher. Research has shown na the passion of the teacher has a great effect on learning. Kaya nga, di ba yung 10 to 15 minutes, the student will only listen to a lecture for 10 to 15 minutes. That still depends on the teacher. I know you've sat through lectures that are 2 hours long, but because the teacher is so engaging, the speaker is so engaging, you don't even want to leave. So the same thing. Yeah.
Okay, I think this is going to be the last one. Again, if you have questions or further need for further clarification, please email Dr. Aguila. For the last question, do you think that our schools will continue to adapt the present e-learning culture post-COVID? Or do you think schools will go back to the traditional method of teaching after the pandemic? So it's your fearless forecast.
A fearless forecast, sana you consider blended learning. Like I said, may backup din siya. Kasi for whatever happens in the future, like even for typhoons or Mayon volcano, or then.
Oo nga, no? Kasi dami din namang disruptions, di ba?
That happened to me. Yung last semester that I was teaching that MA class, we missed 3 sessions. We hadn't met yet 3 sessions. What I did was I had my Google site. I always have a Google site for that class. And what I did was I embedded it's a different platform, a bulletin board system where you put your comments. And I gave them instructions. Read the first materials and you are required to post 1 comment and then respond to another student's comment. So ganon. So parang you need backup. Yes. You need that. So I think that we'll go back, and hopefully when we go back to the schools, they're also applying 21st century learning in their classroom. So it shows in the way the classroom is designed, 20th century pa rin eh. You have students' tables formed individually, facing front. The teacher's table is in front. So if you look at the design of classrooms around the world, iba na. Modular na.
Yeah. Maganda yung point mo about perhaps blended learning ang direction natin in the future even after magkaroon na tayo ng vaccine at ma-address na itong pandemic na ito. Kasi nga sa Pilipinas, daming disruptions magkaroon ng typhoon.
Yes.
Diba? May class suspension. So at least may model na tayo on how we can still...
So ako kasi, like there was a time that classes were suspended and my students were supposed to present something. And it was vital because we were closing towards the end of the semester where I needed to give them assessment already for the next iteration, parang final paper na yung next. So what I asked them to do was to send me their presentation. So some sent me YouTube videos. I told them, bahala kayo, whatever multimedia works for you, I'm willing to look at Google Slides as well or whatever, maski document. Basta I'm sure that I'm able to mark you because I give them the descriptive rubrics that I have enough understanding of what I'm looking at. So if it's a slide, I need to understand. Put your notes there so I can read something. So laging dapat may backup. Hindi pwedeng with technology always like that to have a backup. There.
Okay, Dr. Aguila. Again, if you have questions or need for further clarification, please get in touch with Dr. Aguila. We'll be flashing her email address later on. Some reminders before we end today's webinar. It's almost 11 o'clock. We are inviting you to visit Philippine Association for Communication and Media Research Incorporated's Facebook page for more information about our organization and for details on how you can join. Please just type in Philippine Association for Communication and Media Research Incorporated in Facebook's search bar. For those of you na may mga questions and yung mga popular questions or frequently asked questions na na-post dito sa ating chat box, PACMRI will be creating an infographic para ma-address yung mga question ninyo. Okay ba yun? And we will be posting that infographic sa aming Facebook page. Next, ito, part ito ng proseso ng mga webinars. We need your feedback, please. So we are requesting everyone to please accomplish the evaluation form so we can improve our future offerings, okay? The link to the evaluation form is flashed on screen. Okay, and yes, Dr. Aguilar.
Dr. San Pascual, we're actually encountering a few technical difficulties. They can't put up the link. We can post it on the Facebook page. Oh, there. I think it's there. It's there now.
There you go. So the QR codes for the curated e-learning resources and Dr. Aguila's email address. Andyan din po ang evaluation form. You can click on the link or you can take a photo to copy the link. And please try to visit our Facebook page. We're inviting everyone to join PACMRI. Dr. Aguila, any quick final keywords to our participants before we end our webinar?
I think I've said a lot, pero like I said earlier, I'm only scratching the surface. There's so much about e-learning that I can't deliver in one short webinar. But I tried my best. Hindi na nga ako halos makahinga. So I could give you more. But I'm wishing you good luck. And I know that you can find your way into e-learning. And I have great faith in the teacher, in the Filipino teacher in particular. So, yon. I'd like to give a shout out to Dean Joshua for helping us out from Ateneo ICTC as well, for helping us with our tech. There.
Thank you, Dr. Aguila. We felt your passion. We felt na kahit na medyo ang hirap ng birthing pain nito, lalo na sa aming mga first-timers dito sa bagong mundong ito, your encouragement. Talaga nga namang kakayanin ito dahil wala naman choice. Pero yun na nga, the guides, the tips, very handy, very useful for us to apply. So maraming salamat sa iyo. Thank you, Dr. Aguila. Everyone, for those of you tuned in, why don't we all give Dr. Aguila a virtual round of applause? Please key in those applause emojis, guys, for Dr. Aguila. Thank you, Dr. Aguila. Thank you so much for sharing your morning with us. Ang daming natuwa, ang daming na-encourage dito sa panibagong journey na ito. Our organization, PACMRI, is also thanking the UP Department of Communication Research and the Information and Communications Technology Center of Ateneo de Naga University. Maraming salamat sa pagtulong sa amin. And of course, we are thanking everyone for actively and civilly engaging with us this morning. Maraming salamat. Everyone, it's 11 o'clock on the dot. Keep well, stay safe. Muli, salamat. Thank you, Doc Almond. Maraming salamat sa inyong lahat. Magandang umaga. Happy Thursday.